Oh, let me tell you something. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Blockbusting, the podcast where we love to hate the movies. I'm your host, Jay Light. Joining me today, Austin Train.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jay.
Happy to have you. Happy to catch you on your way to work.
Thank you. Actually, I didn't go home last night.
You've just been out and about since then?
I figured, I work in Hollywood. Your house is around the area, so I might as well just stay out all night.
There you go.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's a plan.
What part of town do you live in?
I live deep in the valley.
Oh, yeah. So
just outside of Woodland Hills.
The more you can stay here in L.A., West Hollywood proper.
Yeah,
if you're working at the Comedy Store.
Try to make as many friends around the neighborhood as possible, just in case I need to crash or.
It's a good move.
Oh, yeah, try.
That's a good way to go. Well, I hope that your friends who you've made around here don't love this movie that you've come to talk about not liking today, because I don't want you to lose that couch privilege.
Thank you.
You came to talk about Fargo.
Yes. So
What happened to you?
Okay, so let me say this. I was because I remember when I watched it, it was maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right? And so I was just getting into watching a lot of movies. Obviously I watched movies, but I was getting into just your friends hey, you got to check out this old Italian movie, or you got to check out this movie.
Right. You got to watch this. You got to watch this thing. It's got Daniel Day-Lewis, and and he does a thing, and he's crazy. And
getting into movie,
right.
being a bit of a movie
going
nerd.
from movie to film.
Yeah, exactly.
When you make that transition in your life.
So I remember I watched it. I didn't like it, but I always loved the Coen Brothers. So it was weird because I remember every day on Comedy Central they played The Big Lebowski, right? So I watched that. That's the perfect background movie. Right, because it's just you get the plot. It's not super complicated,
right?
And they're just every scene is just great to watch, and you can kind of zone in and out.
Yeah, it's funny. The characters you can. It's a good TV cable movie.
Yeah, I think I even saw. I saw a few other Coen Brothers movies before I saw Fargo. I think I saw No Country for Old Men before I saw Fargo, even.
Okay.
So I remember hearing about it and hearing there was this cult classic. When I first watched it, I did not like it. I was like, I watched it again just to make sure. I watched it again. You asked me to do the podcast, and I have a hot take for you.
I don't like Fargo, and I was jarred because I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't like Fargo.
Yeah, it seems like the movie that nobody has. Anybody who's seen it probably likes it. It's one of those movies. It's not like a huge blockbuster where people are divided on it. It was it was successful, but it wasn't this huge,
Right.
So most of the people who knew about it liked it.
And especially for the Coen brothers, who have made so many movies over the years to the point where they have, over the course of their career, made movies that are divisive, that have a lot of people who really like them and a lot of people who think that they're total fucking garbage.
Yeah.
Fargo, it's like Fargo, No Country for Old Men are the two absolute top tier Coen Brothers movies. Raising Arizona too, I guess.
That's another good one.
But those are the ones that people always. As soon as you said I don't like Fargo, I was shocked because I had no idea what your beef with it could have been.
I was so proud to have this hot take because I was like, yeah, I'm gonna hit Jay with this. Just I don't like Fargo, just to be a fucking complete contrarian. So I wanted to get ready for it just in case I ended up coming on the podcast and I didn't really remember the beats of it.
Right.
It just sounded like an asshole. But I watched it again. I was like, oh, I like it now. I know.
This is the second time that this is real where someone has been like, I was wrong from the very jump.
It's almost like I lost my boner. You know what I'm saying? I was about to bring this hot movie take.
You should have taken some film Viagra, some douchebag Cialis.
Yeah, well, it's a good. I mean, there's still a few problems I do have with it. So the thing is, it's weird because Fargo is right in the middle of the Coen Brothers spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. So on one end you have No Country for Old Men, right? That's the most serious kind of action dramatic,
right?
The Grave, and then on the other spectrum, you have like Raising Arizona or The Big Lebowski,
where there are these big, there's some actiony parts in there, but there's basically it's a comedic set piece the entire time.
It's a total comedy. It's very just kind of ridiculous. I mean, and the themes are
Burn
always
After
the same.
Reading is sort of in that vein, for sure.
The themes are always the same, kind of just like people, just a random collusion of events occurring. But Fargo is like right in the middle of it because it is a comedy. It is like it's almost like one of those cringe, like one of those like cringe comedies.
Oh yeah,
a little bit like Curb Your Enthusiasm or the like Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant do those like hey ladies.
Where they like The Office.
Yeah, where they just keep like fucking up and they keep just like ugh. Fargo has a lot of parts like that, like where like the criminals are just keep on fucking up.
Right. The beauty of Fargo and what makes it walk that line is obviously, of course, the setting where you have these people being in and around horrible situations and crazy violence while they're all talking, don't you knows and you betchas and yeah, oh yeah. And, hearing this happens on the TV show too, but there's the scene where Steve Buscemi is fucking a hooker on a couch. Oh yeah. And she's oh yeah, give it to me. Give me that fucking you got it going on. And she's not even there. That's the thing. There's so little swearing in this movie.
Yeah, relatively. The two major Buscemi and the guy who looks like a bloated Ryan Gosling.
Peter Stormare.
Yeah, he doesn't look like he looks like a kind of a fat old Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, he looks like Ryan Gosling if he had a bowl cut instead of and was not sexual at all.
If Ryan
Gosling was an incel, that's what Peter Stormare kind of looks like.
Fat Elvis years. That's like he's the fat Elvis of Ryan Gosling. Like Ryan Gosling is young, hot Elvis,
right?
And this guy is like fat, like fried peanut butter, dying on the toilet.
Yeah, he's got a Vicodin problem.
Yeah. He does pills for sure. He's a little bloated,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing too. Is just you see why they put like when I was growing up, I was always like, why is every crime movie like in New York or LA? And it's because some regional accents sound retarded. Like,
right.
It's hard to be scared by somebody who's like, oh, I'm gonna fuck you up, don't you know?
Right.
That kind of guy is just not, they started making like some Boston movies and the Boston accent can be a little scary coming out of the right mouth. Texas, the Southern accent can get a little scary coming out of the Minnesotan, the deep North accent is just always so.
It's goofy.
I think they overdo it in this movie too. That's an issue I have. That's one of the issues that I still have with it.
And before we get too deep into your issues and the things that you have changed over the course of your watching, just if you haven't seen it in a while and you need a little baseline, Fargo is a 1996 black comedy thriller film produced and directed by the Coen Brothers, starring Frances McDormand as Marge Gunderson, a pregnant Minnesota police chief investigating roadside homicides that ensue after a desperate car salesman hired two criminals to kidnap his wife and extort a hefty ransom from his wealthy father-in-law. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It won Best Director at Cannes, received 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and McDormand won for Best Actress, and it won Best Original Screenplay.
Oh yeah, she crushes it in it.
She's so good in this. That's pretty much all the acting in this movie is really, really, really good. So this begs the question. Besides the problems that you have with it now, what did you watch and not like about it the first time you watched it? What did you go in there thinking and what did you come out thinking?
So I think I remember because growing up I had 2 older half brothers who were like half Italian, so they were really into like mafia movies, right? Like like the Goodfellas, Godfather, Scarface, and in all of those crime movies. Like a big section of crime movies basically shows the criminals as a force to be reckoned with, which is almost like it's almost mythological. Like Tony Montana, Tony Montana, I almost thought Soprano for a second, but Tony Montana at the end of that Scarface, where he's just getting like it's almost like this mythological last stand because he gets shot like 1,000 times,
Right.
And he's just so high on coke, he's just like, "I'll fuck you up." He's just talking shit till the very end,
Right. Yeah, he doesn't care at all.
Goodfellas, just like Danny DeVito or not Danny DeVito. The character's named Tommy DeVito, and
Right.
it's Joe Pesci.
Joe Pesci.
I kind of mixed up a little bit.
If Danny DeVito was in Goodfellas, though, that would be. I mean, I already love
That'd be
Goodfellas,
great.
but if Danny DeVito, why isn't Danny DeVito in more mob movies?
Yeah, he's like the accountant and shit. But Pesci is like a psycho in that movie.
Oh yeah,
He's a force, and like all those, The Godfather, all these movies, the criminals. You almost a lot of times you kind of identify with them more than you. Well, I mean, you do because that's just they're
right. That's the
main
whole point.
character.
You're supposed to, if you're following these movies,
And they're like mythological
you
heroes.
love these guys.
that people idolize now, which is like not the point of those movies.
well,
Like,
yeah, exactly. Did you ever see Hell or High Water?
that's the one with yeah. It's
The bank robbers.
Yeah, the brothers.
Jeff Daniels,
That's
Chris
a really
Pine,
good one. Yeah.
Ben Foster. Yeah, and that's the same. But that's the same. It's as close to making them human as possible, with them still seeming kind of like mythological because their cause is just
Yes.
because they're trying to fuck over the banks.
The banks who fucked over their mother and their
Right.
family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, I get that. That's why they're the heroes of the story. That's why I'm not really rooting for Jeff Bridges to succeed.
Yeah.
And bring them to justice, quote unquote.
Yeah, but there's a thing in movies, like especially when you're a kid, all the stories marketed to kids are like, basically they're very simple hero stories. They're just kind of like the protagonist, the main character is the hero. You are supposed to identify with them.
Right.
Now, in a lot of movies, you're not supposed to really do that with Scarface, but we all do. We all kind of idolize, Al Pacino in Scarface,
Right.
or in Godfather. We idolize him. We're not supposed to though. But the thing I had a problem with going from like simple to like more kind of complex stories was like I used to love Taxi Driver, and I thought that Travis Bickle was the hero, right? And then I read like American Film Institute's greatest villains, Travis Bickle, and I was like, no, he's a hero. And then I started watching it again. I'm like, oh no, he's the protagonist. He's the main character.
Right.
But he is a villain. Like he is a destructive character. But you kind of over-identify sometimes with just the main character. And that's a problem I had with Fargo, is how pathetic of a character William H. Macy's character. He is such a, and you made me feel uncomfortable because I'm used to rooting for the criminal in movies or the underdog, and this guy is so irredeemable.
Right.
He's both like scummy and also pathetic.
Right.
He's just
And
this
a
used
fucking
car
idiot.
salesman. He's an idiot. He's completely incompetent.
Right.
Like they show him, they have this great juxtaposition of like first he's selling a car to these people, and he like included this extra charge in it that they didn't agree to, and they're getting mad at him. So he's like, I'm gonna go talk to my boss. He pretends to go talk to his boss. He just watches a little bit of the hockey game with his coworker. Comes back, he's like, hey, I got a good deal. It's the unprecedented. We're gonna knock $100 off the extra charge. And the guys just give in. The people give in. He tries to basically do a deal with his father-in-law.
Right.
And his father-in-law is like, you're not selling me a fucking car. Get the fuck out of it.
Right.
Immediately shuts him down. Because the only thing he knows how to do is kind of like squeeze people when he has leverage.
Mm-hmm.
But you see in this whole deal, because he's trying to get the money because he wants to start his own business, right? So that's why he's trying to get the money.
Right, because he wants to be a parking lot guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, by the way, if there's ever like a sad sack business, it's owning and operating a parking lot in Minnesota.
It is sad sack, but it probably way safer returns.
Oh yeah,
Than anything, because it is just it's a license to print money. Because you just own an area and you charge people to use it, and you barely have to maintain it. But yeah, it is this whole. It made me feel uncomfortable when I was younger because of how pathetic almost all the characters are, except for Frances McDormand's character.
Right.
Is a fairly competent, very reasonable policewoman. All the criminals are supposed to be these villains. They're just these fucking idiots. They're either like grotesquely cruel or just stupid or both.
Right, yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, if you really boil it down, the final confrontation is between the ultimate hero, who is Francis McDormand, and the ultimate villain of the story, who's Peter Stormare, because he's the one who is the most. He's the one who does all of the most violent acts in the movie.
Yes,
with no recourse. You know, he's the one who shoots the cop that starts the whole chain of events. He's the one. He shoots the other two people and chases them down.
Yeah,
and he's got no problem being violent and murdering the wife. And throwing his guy, axing Steve Buscemi in the face, and then putting his body in a wood chipper.
Oh yeah, just out of completely like he's rode this whole way with this guy, and then turns on him. You know what's an interesting point I like that I didn't notice the first time around? Because the guy who hooks them up is called Shep Proudfoot. He's the guy. He's a mechanic. That's the guy. That's William H. Macy's character's connection to these guys.
Right.
He says when William H. Macy comes to talk to him, he says he vouches for Peter Stormare's character,
right,
but not for Buscemi's. And the whole movie based off everything starts to go wrong because Steve Buscemi's character forgot to put tags on the car.
Right.
So, and he basically is the guy who keeps he's the guy who causes all of it because he tries to bribe the cop. That leads the other guy to have to kill the cop and kill the witnesses. And that's a funny little touch I didn't notice the first time around. That it's a nice little detail, but it's not too hidden. Like a lot of directors will put really tiny details,
right?
But they kind of put it right there in plain sight as long as you're paying attention.
That's the thing. I noticed the exact same thing, and I was like, oh, I like because it really all the pieces fit together well, and I'm glad that this movie is as airtight as it is.
Yeah.
So you watched it the first time, you don't like it, and what are you coming away thinking when you watch it for the first time and you're not liking it? Do you remember?
It just made me uncomfortable how pathetic the criminals were. I like having.
Did you want to root for the criminals?
I always liked rooting for the criminals or for the underdog, and that's William H. Macy's underdog character. But as growing, kind of as I've gotten older, I'm like, some underdogs should stay down there. They should always be under because there's a reason. And it's not always that people are like, they just one thing for them to be great. Sometimes people make themselves shittier. Sometimes they have a problem and they exacerbate it.
Right.
Another thing that kind of bothered me, and people might take issue with this, but I don't like how spry Frances McDormand's. She's 7 months pregnant. And there's a few scenes, she's very, when she's investigating the roadside homicide, there's a scene where she, gets up off her knees. That's not happening. I know that's such a little, nitpick, but that really bothered me the first time around. It kind of still bothered me a little bit. And then when she shoots him, it doesn't show you how she got him into the car. It's is this 7 month pregnant lady hauling this giant fucking those Minnesotans, the corn-fed giant people.
There's people. She's eating a lot of fast food. She's not.
That guy's huge.
How did she
get him into the car?
The strength. There's a lot. That's I don't really think about that kind of stuff, but who knows?
Well, I do like when a character has physical limitations, but I don't like it. I like it when they have to find ways around their physical limitations.
Right.
Granted, that's such a small part of the movie that for some reason really bothered me the first time around. I know it's fucking stupid.
You just don't support strong women, do you, Austin?
Okay, you got
women get pregnant, they can do anything.
Look, I don't support strong pregnant women, but strong non-pregnant women, I support you guys.
If you're gonna be pregnant, you better be helpless, or else.
Not helpless, but I mean, I like it. She's very clever. She's very
really
clever
smart
in the movie. She sticks up for herself. Like when there's that weird scene where the guy hits her up. Remember from high school,
and
he
she
tries
goes,
and he's like, what if how about I just sit right here? He's like, oh no, I'd prefer it if you sat across, just so I don't have to crane my neck.
Right.
She's very she shuts him down, very nicely but firmly and confidently.
Yep. Same deal when she goes into Jerry Lundegaard's office, William H. Macy, and she's back and she's just so how come you haven't done an inventory of your cars?
Yeah.
And he's freaking out and trying to get her to leave, and she just very sternly is like, I'm just trying to do my job. You don't have to freak out on me like this.
She's not even sternly though. She's just she's just she's firm, but she's not mean.
Right.
She's like
she's being very cool under pressure because she's a fucking cop. She has to be.
But it's a big thing in that movie is the Minnesota nice, because some people you can tell like it's just passive aggressive,
Right.
And her it's just like, oh yeah, it's okay. Like she's just trying to like deal with the situation and kind of like keep it. She's not, their emotions aren't going too much one way or the other.
Right.
She's just kind of got that same like, oh okay, all right, That's another nice little touch. It's like because if you look at like people regionally, their temperaments are so different. Like I grew up in California and like
What part of California?
Southern California. People here are people especially on the West Coast, so different East Coast, so different Southern, so different Midwestern, so different Northerners.
I mean, I grew up in the South. There's a lot of, it's not necessarily Minnesota nice, but there's a lot of bless your heart that gets thrown around.
Oh, and there's a lot
which
of
is like the nice 40-year-old white woman way of saying fuck you.
Yeah, you're retarded.
Yeah.
Something. There's also those the Texas. I always figure the Texas authority figures. There's always some cop or some security guard from Texas who's got like a big belt buckle.
Oh yeah,
and this guy's got that voice and it's like, look here, I'm from Texas.
Texas basically, they still have the Texas Rangers. They still got their own like state-run gigantic police force.
Yeah.
That the rest of that doesn't really exist in a lot of the country still.
Oh yeah.
Which is, that's Texas for you.
Oh yeah, they love having their own thing. But yeah, that's another nice little touch because like I was saying earlier, they do crime movies, and and a lot of places get oversaturated. Like New York, obviously, all the time. Boston, they did a bunch of crime movies in like the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, back in the day, they used to do a lot of crime movies there. LA is always going to be a cesspool. But they don't do a lot of like random ones around the Midwest, right? A little bit of Chicago.
Right.
Maybe
Chicago's
some
like
southern
the city.
places. But not a lot of that's the part I liked, is just kind of deciding to put this story in this place that pretty much everyone overlooks.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of horror movies that sort of take place in the parts that crime movies don't really touch. I feel like there's a lot of horror movies that are sort of set in like a desert or like the deep
Midwest.
South or the Midwest. Yeah.
They like doing the Midwest because it's like, the cornfields, the Midwest, like also that area, like Minnesota, North Dakota, it's like these great plains. It's creepy. You see the shots with the snow, and there's nothing but snow. There's no hills. It's just flat white.
Well, that's part of the beauty of this movie is there are those really stark shots where it's just almost a total whiteout, but there's a fence and a car.
Yeah.
And that's all you see. That's the only blotch of color on the whole thing. Same with when they find the homicides, the car the first time. It's like you got the iconic, it's on the poster even, is the body in a red coat on white snow. Or the blood from when Steve Buscemi's getting shoved into the wood chipper, just flung out all about the snow. It's just a gigantic patch of red.
Yeah, I do like that. Also, I feel like the kind of just the clear white field of snow also kind of represents like the emptiness of like parts of American culture.
Yeah,
like in America doesn't. Parts of America don't really have much of a culture. Like the South has like culture. Huge parts of America are just like. They're just places where people live. There's nothing.
Right.
They just consume and they try to make money. And this kind of movie, I think it touches on something in that. Because like William H. Macy's character is just so, like he's just empty. He's just an empty guy. You don't really get anything from his personality besides his desperation and his desperation to kind of make something for himself. This kind of like pride he has,
but even
to get out from under his father-in-law's shadow.
But even the making something for himself is like, oh, I'm gonna make a parking lot.
It's so limited. It's such
so
a limited, unimaginative idea. But that's the kind of. And another thing I like about the movie is how ugly a lot of the people are. Like a lot of the actors.
Oh yeah,
they're not.
Oh yeah,
who's like the best looking person in the movie is like Frances McDormand.
Yeah, Frances McDormand is for sure the most attractive person in this movie.
Yeah, all the guys like Steve Buscemi's weird looking, William H. Macy's he's
kind of funny looking. And even the people in the movie are like, yeah, Steve Buscemi looks weird.
Looking.
He's funny looking. He's more funny looking than other people.
Yeah. Peter Stormare's he's handsome for a little wide. He's a little wide, But yeah, that's another nice little touch. But that's just watching it. I think that shows like sometimes you got to give something another chance because like the older you get, you kind of appreciate different things.
Yeah, that was so. What now? do you like the movie? What was the really big shift? Is now that you can appreciate the complexity of what they were going for with the movie?
Well, now I think I watch. I've seen so many more different types of movies because like I was saying earlier, I was kind of trapped in one kind of perspective, like kind of straightforward hero stories, or like the kind of the mob movies, the mafia movies try to kind of they lionize criminals in a certain sense. But there's a lot of movies I started watching. Like I remember I started watching some what's it, neo-realism, like the old Italian shit where they would just get
some Fellini stuff.
They would get like bakers to play They would get regular people to. I remember watching like The Bicycle Thief and not liking it at first, and then kind of being like, "Oh, okay, I get. It's not supposed to be a happy movie,
right?
It's supposed to just be this kind of sad portrait of post-war Italy." I started watching more kind of like I watched a lot of Akira Kurosawa. He does kind of those like hero movies, but then also he has characters who kind of stay true to themselves.
Right.
Like a lot of shit in American film is like there's a slacker, he does nothing, and then one day he just decides to become great. And then like all American comedies are like that. There's just some like Vince Vaughn in Dodgeball. Just a fucking loser, and then all of a sudden this opportunity presents itself, and then he all of a sudden figures everything out, wins the girl.
Someone I think who does, Paul Thomas Anderson, I think, does that really well with his movies. He'll make these characters that are the protagonists of the movie.
Yeah.
But they are very difficult to like to the point where you are at times actively rooting against them or hoping that they don't succeed.
Oh, that's the thing with horror movies, too.
Right.
If you ever notice, a lot of horror movies, some of them, I think it's like the Friday the 13th kind of thing where like all the kids are just like these shitty kids that you don't like.
Right.
There's like some horror movies where you like the Night of the Living Dead, you like the hero, you're like, oh, how are they going to deal with the situation? But then certain movies, like a lot of these slasher flicks, the kids are obnoxious. They're like these young people who are like, they're stupid or they're reckless or they're just needlessly cruel.
Right.
And they get their comeuppance. So it's almost like you end up rooting for like the Jason Voorhees or the Michael Myers.
Right,
character.
which is why those movies, as far as rewatchability goes, it's like, okay, cool. I don't really care about those because I don't feel real. There's no attachment to that. That's why I like. What I like about Fargo, and like even more now upon watching it, is I watched this movie a long time, probably about the same amount of time ago as you did, like 10 years ago. And since then, I've watched the entirety of the television series based on Fargo. And having watched that, and now coming back and watching Fargo again, which is set in the same universe, and the TV show expands on a lot of the same themes and some of the actual plot points.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to come back and watch and be like, this is where all the groundwork for not just that television show, but for a lot of stylistic choices for characters really sort of has its groundwork laid in movies like Fargo.
Yeah.
And Fargo is does such a great job of pulling all of that together in making a movie that is really dramatic and really violent and has these characters that are sort of indelible and really stick in your mind.
Yeah.
And are bad people who you don't root for, but you can get behind. You see where their motivations are.
Yeah.
Even as dumb as that character might be. It's like that was the impressive part for me, is watching and seeing they did this in the 90s.
They're more kind of honest characters too, because there's this they're cruel, incompetent, desperate, driven by money, and a lot of times it is a tragedy. Like it is an old school kind of like, because that was the breakup between tragedies and comedies back in ancient Greece. Was a comedy just ended happily,
right?
A tragedy ended sadly. It wasn't like a comedy was like funny, ha ha. It was just like it was more an upbeat ending, and the tragedies were like considered higher art,
right? Because
it was more kind of, I guess, close to real life. But I think I didn't appreciate it as a tragedy as much as like, because it is funny. But like I was saying earlier, it's like in the middle of the Coen Brothers spectrum, because there's the very overly comedic, and then there's the overly kind of dramatic, serious. Like, did you ever see Blood Simple, their
Never.
first movie? It's very good. It's but it's almost like very similar to Fargo, where just like a bunch of mistakes kind of keep they kind of keep coalescing until like everything falls apart, that kind of thing. And I like what's interesting too is the Big Lebowski is almost the same plot line. It's like a kidnapping and a botched ransom.
Just from the opposite side.
Yeah, but just from a funner LA take on it.
Yeah, it's the weird detective who gets looped in.
Fucking Cali vibes version.
Yeah. Stone, drinking White Russians. Well, that's A Simple Man does very similar, or not A Simple Man, a Serious Man is another Coen movie where it's the same sort of vibe of like, this person is making a lot of mistakes and they wind up and they're sort of a victim of circumstance in more so than that.
I don't even think he makes mistakes, really.
It's he doesn't know how to respond to the circumstances he's in.
It's an inverted reading of the tale of Job from the Bible about basically God punishing this guy. God is making this man suffer, because it's not, that's just what God's will. It's not your very like Calvinist take on it. Like it's not your place to question God, except his shit doesn't end well. It just keeps getting worse. And as soon as he gives in and compromises his integrity to like the smallest amount, the doctor calls him, it's probably cancer or something, and then a hurricane comes to kill his kid.
Right.
It's just the most like it's almost a subverting kind of orthodoxy doctrine, of kind of just don't question God, things just work out.
Well, that obviously that movie is heavily steeped in Jewish culture, which makes total sense given that is the kind of subject matter that the movie is overarchingly about.
Yeah,
Fargo is like Fargo's like sort of a mirror image of that, where like people get themselves into these crazy predicaments all through their own doing, and make everything worse without the help of outside forces. Like there are people at almost every point in the movie where you can make a decision where there's a right decision and a wrong decision as far as like the thing that will keep the the father-in-law alive.
I want to keep calling him stepfather too.
He's got a lot of stepdad vibes.
He's got that mean patriarch vibe.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But if he had just if Stan Grossman and it just said, hey, listen, you probably should keep going along with what these criminals are saying and don't go to the parking lot.
Yeah.
Then everything's going to be okay, and we'll get the daughter back. And at the very least, but the movie doesn't take. That's the easy way out for the movie.
It probably
which is the right move to not do on the Coen's part.
I honestly think they might have just killed her anyways because it's just knowing those guys.
But, for sure.
So you brought up A Serious Man, right? As a kind of like a Jewish story. I almost think this reads like a Midwestern Protestant. It almost has a religious vibe to it, right? Because the protagonist doesn't engage. Frances McDormand, happily married, goes about her business. All the characters who kind of either die or involved in the scheme exhibit. So the father-in-law, prideful,
right?
William H. Macy, he's envious and he's greedy. Greed is everywhere, right? But there's sloth.
Peter Stormare is very wrathful.
He's wrathful. He's also slothful, just sitting around. He's a little gluttonous because he keeps on talking about eating pancakes. You can throw gluttony in there a little bit. Did we get all of them?
I think so.
And lust, obviously, because
they're fucking
Buscemi
hookers.
keeps on fucking the hook. That's what gets him. That's part of what gets him popped.
Exactly. Yeah, because he's talking about. Well, he can't. He's talking about trying to get some woman action, as he so eloquently puts it to the bartender.
Oh, I love that scene where he calls him up. And he's just the back and forth, and I go, and he goes, and I go. It's so.
It's a great. I'm glad you came around on it.
Yeah,
this episode wasn't as exciting because of that. But
I was proud. I mean, sometimes I think I get a little excited about having a hot take, and then I'm like, I just go a little bit overboard. and then I come back around. I'm like, oh, you're right.
I remember watching it and just me and my girlfriend were just sitting here being like, how can anyone hate this movie? And I'm glad that you have proven us wrong.
I could see why if you don't watch a lot of movies, I could see why you would hate it.
Yeah.
Right. So I remember watching Us in film, in the theaters. Mm-hmm. And I liked it a lot because I could kind of see like, all right, this is the kind of thematic elements. This is what it's saying. And of course, there's this like there's a fucking line of teenagers 2 rows in front of me. Like, that sucked. That was bad. And I'm just like, God, like you guys, the point is not that it surprises you or doesn't. You see certain themes and you kind of like, it's almost like a thesis, right? Like a movie is almost like you're watching someone's thesis, but just acted out with characters and a plot and dialogue.
Exactly.
But a lot of people, I can see why somebody wouldn't like it if they didn't watch a lot of movies. Because it does, you want to see more of a payoff. And like the end is a little anticlimactic, the way she just like drives by. I also didn't like, I mean, it's kind of par for course with their movies, but she just kind of she happens to drive by and see the car. And that's how she catches them.
Right.
Like she was a good police, she did some good police work.
Well, she did enough police work to be on the, hey, I'm going to drive by this lake that we talked to the guy about.
She's good enough to get lucky, basically.
She's put herself in the right, she's done enough work to put herself in the right spot.
Yeah.
And then, hey, guess what? I can find a man shoving somebody's leg with a sock on it into a wood chipper.
Yeah, that's a little too perfect to just run up on somebody while they're just disposing of evidence.
I'll handle that.
I got it. I mean, yeah.
Austin, thanks for coming on today, dude.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Where can the listeners find you on social media and stuff?
Twitter at Austin_train. Instagram Austin_train.
Sweet.
Got the underscore game, baby.
Get that underscore in. You can find me at Diet J on Twitter and Instagram, jlightcomedy.com for show dates. And if you like podcasts, tell a friend and join the Facebook group. Links at the top of the show notes. I don't know why I just did that. That felt too much.
I appreciated it.
Well, I appreciate it. You know what? I'm going to run with it. This has been Blockbusting. Go see something good for a change.